Testing. Testing.
Good evening. I'm hoping that if I just start, our panelists will be quiet and sit down, maybe, if they... But there's nothing better than friendly chatter. So I'm glad you're here this evening. We're going to be discussing a topic that could hardly be more divisive and complex. And so it's a really hard topic to discuss, and I want to just quickly go over a few ground rules for us. My real desire is for us to develop a sense of community dialogue. You know, we can discuss things without dialogue. You can debate things without dialogue. But dialogue is where you really listen to what other people say and try to find common ground. And what I love about dialogue, there's a certain magic. A guy wrote a book a while back called The Magic of Dialogue. And the magic of dialogue is that when you're talking to someone in a dialogical way, you're not just trying to best them, but you're looking for common ground, and that changes everything, right? If you're trying to best them, then it's an argument, and it doesn't, nobody gets convinced of anything through showing them that they're wrong, right? But when we listen to what other people say and try to find common ground, it changes the whole nature of the process, and you really make progress. So a few quick ground rules for us today. We listen to understand, not to respond. I don't know how many times, and my wife is just so great at this, because when she's in a discussion with someone, she's actually listening to them. I'm just trying to think of what I'm going to say next, right? And so she's taught me a lot over the years on how to be a better listener. She's an extraordinary listener. So the second thing is to critique ideas, not people. We're not here to critique anyone. We're here to appreciate what are the perspectives and opinions of others, but to disagree respectfully. And then seeking common ground is the last bit. Would you all mind? I've got if I just used a short bio for you, is that okay? It'll just really help us to move forward more quickly. So we have 4 speakers, and they're going to be in alphabetical order, or go in alphabetical order. And first we have John Hockery, who is our women's soccer coach, and he's also an immigration attorney. And some of you may have heard him speak on South Dakota Public Broadcasting. He did an hour interview with John about immigration law recently, and did a great job with that. And so we're great to have John. We're glad to have John here as our women's soccer coach, but we're also very glad to have John here as our immigration law specialist. And Tanisa Islam also is an immigration attorney, and she's the CEO of South Dakota Voices for Peace and South Dakota Voices for Justice. And she was telling me just the other day that their office now has 11 people. Isn't that correct? And it just started 10 years ago or so. Yeah, so even less than that. So their office has done very well in representing the rights of those who are needing advocacy, legal advocacy. And Mary Hogan down at the other end. Mary is the Community Relations Officer for the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, often known as ICE. And so it's great to have Mary here from Minnesota. We enjoyed having dinner together with Mary this evening, and Ben. And so Ben Reddy is the Southeast Regional Director for Senator John Thune. And he's done a lot of public policy discussions with John, kind of an advisor on all issues of, man, I saw the list on your bio, but it was quite a list of... Back in the day. Yeah, back in the day. So, and Ben has been very helpful with our McGovern engagement group. He came over and consulted with our group about some questions that we had about the school lunch programs, and it was very helpful with that issue. So let's go ahead and get started. The way this is going to work is we're going to have each one of them give opening remarks. This will take as a total about 30 minutes. Each one will have 8 minutes. Ian over here is going to be running the clock. So we'll start with John, and then we'll go to Mary at the other side. We're going alphabetical order, then Tanisa and Ben. And they'll each have 8 minutes and their only cue is like, what do we really need to know? What is it about immigration that people often get wrong? What do we really need to know? And with a little bit of a focus on South Dakota or the Midwest, any of that. So, John, why don't you give us our beginning?
I need to, I have a little activity. Okay. So don't start my clock until my activity starts. Okay. What I'm going to ask is I'm going to hand someone an outdated version of Kurzban, and all I ask is pass it around, kind of like the church collection basket. But instead of putting something in, I want you to take something out. Open to a random page, read one line. That's all I ask. Read just one line. Not out loud, sorry. In your brain, because otherwise my whole 8 minutes is going to be gone. So just pass it and read one line. Hopefully by the end of my 8 minutes, it will have got through enough of you for me to make my point. The first thing I want to do is I just want to start by addressing a myth. And then I'm going to segue my myth into something that I'm passionate about. So there's a myth that you hear often, which is I just want people to wait in line or do it the right way. The reality is there is no line, and there really is no right way. Of course there is a right way. But the paths to being able to permanently reside in the United States, and I'm talking about green card permanent residence, which then offers a path to citizenship, are extremely narrow. At my law firm, we used to quote 99.9% of the world's population is not eligible to be able to come and live permanently in the United States. I don't know if that statistic is true, but it gets the point across, is that there is a very, very tiny sliver of the population of the world that actually would be able to legally come and reside permanently in the United States. Those 4 main categories, so the 4 main categories under which people can obtain green cards are family-based. The idea of uniting Americans with their loved ones. So family-based immigration, most of you are familiar with, getting a green card based on marriage. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Proposal with Sandra Bullock, but it's that system, right? And that encompasses more than just marriages. You're talking about spouses, children, parents, siblings, but that's family-based immigration, family-based green cards. Then there's employment-based green cards. You have to find a sponsor, an employer who's willing to sponsor an alien worker, and you have to prove that there's no American workers ready, willing, able, and available to do that job, which is a very, very difficult and very narrow process. Then there is the humanitarian groups that I like to group them all together: asylum, refugee, and other. And the other is a very broad category of some not very deep categories. So, for example, Afghani translators that helped soldiers in our Gulf wars are eligible to get green cards. And there's a bunch of categories like that are very shallow categories, but they fall within that kind of humanitarian group: asylum, refugee, other. And then the final is diversity lottery. The diversity lottery is exactly what it sounds like. It's a lottery where members of countries who are not highly represented in our population are allowed to submit their name to a lottery system, and if their name is drawn, they can eventually process an immigrant visa at the U.S. Embassy in their home country and receive a green card. That's it. Those four categories are it. It is a very, very narrow group of people who fit into the categories of people that are currently eligible to come and live permanently in the United States. Now, that's currently how our immigration laws are written. And I think what's very, very important is that we understand that, and then we make a determination of whether we are okay with that or not. And then we should cast our votes and have our political opinions be based on whether we are okay with these categories being very narrow. And if we are currently okay with how narrow they are, we need to understand that before we have discussion about it. This then gets me to my point that I'm passionate about. I quoted 99.9% of the world's population is not eligible to immigrate to the United States permanently. That is currently how our laws are written. You have to fit into one of those very narrow categories. What I want to focus on is the 0.1%, if that stat is correct. And I'm not married to that stat, but the 0.1%, just to run with that statistic, that is eligible. It breaks my heart, and it is an absolute tragedy when an otherwise eligible individual is not able to obtain an immigration benefit for which they are eligible because they don't have access to legal services, or because they don't understand a complicated system, or because they are ripped off by a notario in some way, or something tragic happens to them. That breaks my heart, and this gets me to my activity. Immigration law is a ridiculously complex body of federal law. I was a practicing immigration attorney for 7 years. I was in the immigration law world for about 10 years, between working as a law clerk at a firm, translating, and then ultimately becoming an immigration attorney. And the number one thing that I learned is there's so much I don't know. A client walks in your door and you pour hours of research into a new topic and you do a good job for them, only to never ever have that type of case again. You're nodding with me because you know exactly how that feels, right? And so I'm passing around this Kurzban, and what's cool about Kurzban is it's a source book, and what that means is I'm asking each of you to read a line in there. In that line you read, there's probably a reference to the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act. That's the statute upon which our immigration laws are based. There's probably reference to a federal register, a code, a regulation, right? And here, this is only some of the codes. I have 6 CFR, 20 CFR, 22 CFR, 28 CFR, 42, 45. That's missing 8 and 62 off the top of my head. You can probably rattle off a couple more that are missing there. We're also talking about the Foreign Affairs Manual. We're talking about BIA, Board of Immigration Appeals decisions that you have to know, because, hey, this is the law, this is the statute, but this is how the Board of Immigration Appeals is currently ruling on it. You have to have federal circuit court decisions memorized. You have to ICE is constantly pumping out new memorandum. USCIS is pumping out new memorandum that you have to familiarize yourself with. And heck, local field offices, there might be officers that lean a certain way. So hey, this is how we want to present this case because we know that this local officer likes this, or this local ICE attorney is willing to hear these arguments, right? Or this judge is more amenable to these arguments. These are things that immigration attorneys think about, and these are things that the average person who faces this massive monolithic federal government and dense body of federal law has no clue what they're facing. And so oftentimes you see, what breaks my heart is somebody who is removed from the country, but they had a path, they had relief from removal. Somebody who doesn't seek an immigration benefit or fails to obtain immigration benefit because they did something wrong, or they missed a deadline, or they filed something incorrectly. And sometimes it's friends and family that can be harmful. Oh, I went through the process, so I'm going to help my friend. Well, everybody's situation is different. Every single person that walked through my door has a different situation, and I have to do research. I have to go through regulations, laws, decisions, memorandum. And so when individuals are pro se, which means on their own, not represented by counsel, in front of a ridiculously complex system and before a very, very powerful federal government, it breaks my heart when that 0.1% who is eligible to obtain status doesn't. Because they didn't have access to the services they need. And we can have a moral or ethical, philosophical debate about whether our immigration system should be complex. I personally think it should be, and it maybe even necessarily must be. When we're talking about something as important as whom we want to allow into our country, whom we want to remove from the country, whom we want to be allowed to be citizens, maybe that is something that necessarily must be complex. 1 minute. Okay. That is something that necessarily must be complex. And I think we should be okay with that. But the point is, what breaks my heart is individuals who are otherwise eligible to remain in this beautiful country and fail to because of a lack of access to legal services, a lack of access to help through a ridiculously complex system.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Mary?
Thank you. Do I need this?
Either one,
Okay.
whichever it's your
Nope,
pleasure.
this is fine. I just didn't want the noise. I do not have big, thick law books with me, but what I will say, Department of Homeland Security was created as a direct response to 9/11. Until that point, we had not had one single cabinet department that was dedicated to securing the homeland. So what they did was they took some components from other departments, FEMA, for example, they took Secret Service out of Treasury, took the Coast Guard, and they put them under the one umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security. When it comes to Immigration Customs Enforcement, what they did was they took the benefit portion of the old INS and created USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services. They're the ones who handle all the benefits associated with immigration. The enforcement aspect they put under this new umbrella of Immigration Customs Enforcement. So that's the immigration enforcement. Then they took the old customs inspectors, who were the criminal investigators, and they created the Homeland Security investigations. So Immigration Customs Enforcement is essentially police. We're the police. That's who I represent. I represent the police at the field level. I am a civil servant. I am not a politician. I warned him. I warned. That's what I do. I speak for our field officers and agents who are working in the Dakotas, in Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska. I do not discuss policy. I do not discuss individual cases. There's a reason for that, right? Individual cases, half of that book that you're moving around talks about the privacy laws, I'm sure. Maybe not quite half, but maybe more than half, I don't know. So we don't discuss individual cases. I don't discuss policy. Every law enforcement agency has a boss, right? Ours is the president. The president oversees federal law enforcement. Every administration comes into office, sets the tone, sets the focus for what they want their agencies to do. Now, when it comes to that book that you're passing around right there, we also discussed earlier the last substantive change to our immigration laws in this country. These laws are decades old, that we are enforcing. So while the tempo of what we're doing is probably more increased than the last administration. The laws are not different, right? So it breaks your heart when you see people who would otherwise have had a benefit find themselves being removed from the country. But you did mention one thing: when you have these increased tempos and increased misunderstanding and increased fear, right, you have people who are increasing victimization and scams. And what it's heartrending when you hear somebody paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that they didn't have to waste when they hear, oh, if you just give me $10,000, I'll make you a citizen. You give me this and I'll take care of your case. Not anybody can do that law. You would not go to a pediatrician for your heart surgery, right? That doesn't mean one area is more difficult than the other. You must specialize. Immigration attorneys have to specialize. There are so many resources available to sort out those scams and those bad actors, and we try to get that information out there as well. So when it comes to this discussion and the discussion about the complexities of this issue, this is incredibly complex law. Our officers and agents are scrutinized to an extent that I cannot imagine any other law enforcement agency, any other profession. They are scrutinized internally, right? We have to make sure that we're doing our job the way we're supposed to do it, the way the administration wants it done, legally, safely, ethically, compassionately, right? We are scrutinized by the legislative branch, because when the funds are appropriated to our agency, we have to be expending them properly and in a fiscally responsible manner. We are scrutinized by the courts, just like any law enforcement agency is, making sure that what we do comports with the law and the standing case law that's out there. And we are scrutinized by the public, and we should be. We are responsible to our country. We've all sworn an oath to uphold the laws and enforce them the way the laws require, right? But it is incredibly difficult work, as you can see from that book, under incredibly difficult conditions. But that's what they're doing every single day. Our agents and our officers are members of the same communities, go to the same churches, go to the same schools, play on the same soccer teams, right? They want to make their communities safe as well. And that's basically who I'm here representing. These agents and officers go for training. Months it takes them in South Georgia, away from their homes, away from their families. They go to training for months at a time just to become a rookie agent or an officer, come back to their offices and work under the direct supervision of senior officials, right? So not just anybody can do this work, and they are doing it the best way that they can, and they're doing it every single day, and they did it 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. So that's kind of the one thing that I would say about our officers and our agents. They're here trying to keep their communities safe. When it comes to these discussions, they're crucial. They're crucial to have. We have to have these conversations because nobody knows everything. There is not just one answer or another answer to any of our concerns. There's always going to be something somewhere in the middle, and once we can start finding some things to agree on, then I think we can build it from there. I think it's also crucial to have the kinds of conversations that were mentioned just a minute ago. How do we want to see policy? How do we want to see the administration? How do we want to see our laws? But I'm not going to be involved in that conversation because, again, civil servant, not a politician. So that's 7 minutes. He got one of my minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'm sure a lot of you are going to have questions. So I forgot to mention we're going to do 30 minutes with each one of them getting 8 minutes, or roughly 30 minutes. And then they'll ask some questions of each other, and then there'll be room for questions that you all might have. I'm sure someone will have a question for you. Yeah. So Tanisa, let's hear what you want us to know.
Is it okay if I stand at the podium? I feel like I'm like not grounded here. I might trip when I try to get back up there too, so thank you. I'm glad you can see my face. Sometimes I'm behind podiums that cover my eyes. So thank you. Thanks for having me here. I wanted to start addressing some common misunderstandings that are used as a factual basis for immigration debates. First and foremost, I will be using the term unlawfully present or undocumented to describe people who are unlawfully present and not the word alien. If you look at current federal laws, several derogatory words are still written, and we as a nation have evolved in humanizing language and no longer say things like half-breed, Negro, or colored persons as found in federal statutes today. The first myth I wanted to address is that there are between 11 to 14 million undocumented people living in the United States. They do not have legal permission to be here. The majority of undocumented people entered the country lawfully on a visa, like a tourist visa, and did not leave when the visa expired. It is not people crossing the border illegally. In 1980, immigrants made up about 6.2% of the U.S. population, and the total crime rate was about 5,900 crimes per 100,000 people. By 2022, the share of the immigrants have more than doubled to 13.9%, while the total crime rate actually dropped by 60.4% to 2,335 crimes per 100 people. Specifically, the violent crime rate fell by 34.5%. Undocumented immigrants paid $96.7 billion in federal, state, and local taxes in 2022. Undocumented immigrants paid $25.7 billion into Social Security, $6.4 billion into Medicare, and $1.8 billion into unemployment insurance taxes in 2022, all of these programs from which they are barred from accessing. The last time people could freely enter our country was about 1882, when we have the Chinese Exclusion Act telling us who could no longer come into our country. This became the foundation of our current immigration system, exclusion. President Obama is known as the deporter-in-chief, deporting over 3.2 million in his first term and 2.1 million in his second term. Biden was second to Obama with 3.3 million deportations. Each had 3 times as many deportations as Trump 1.0. One of the biggest drivers for illegal entries into the United States is the labor market. From February 21 to August of 24, there were more open jobs each month than in any month before Biden's term began. As labor demand has subsided, in 2024, we see that immigration has fallen as well. There are over 3 million applications for legal status pending at the agency that was mentioned who makes these decisions, USCIS, 3 million. In April of 2024, there were 3.6 million cases pending in immigration courts across the country. About 1.3 million of these are asylum claims. Drastic federal funding cuts have increased this wait time and line even more. These are just some of the reasons I would argue that our immigration system is broken. It was never built to allow people in lawfully. What we see is a hodgepodge of programs, policies, and Band-Aid fixes across different administrations. In my lifetime, the most impactful Band-Aid fix was in 1986 when President Reagan granted amnesty to any immigrant in the United States who entered before 1992. The Obama implemented DACA, which impacted 800,000 people, whereas the Reagan amnesty plan impacted 3 million people. Biden actually increased lawful entry through the CBP One app and other programs, in addition to deporting the largest numbers yet. Whereas the Trump administration abolished the CBP One app on day one, and in his first administration abolished asylum at the southern border, a right afforded by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So what does this all really mean? Does mass deportation work? Do amnesty programs work? What are we going to do with this crisis? But wait, what exactly is the crisis? Is the crisis that we have too many job openings and not enough Americans to work them? Or is it that there are not enough legal pathways to enter our country and work, leaving illegal entries and employers employing undocumented people as the driving force? How much time do I have left? Okay, 2 minutes. I was at a seminar last week at USD Law School where Dean Fulton reminded me about something essential. Laws are a human tool. Laws are a human tool, made either to suppress those without or to provide justice so we can all have. We have lost sight of what justice and due process looks like in our conversations about immigration and deportation. In April of 2018, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced a zero-tolerance policy, literally separating children from their moms and dads at the border, saying that this deterrence would impede further illegal immigration into our country. More than 4,600 children were separated from their parents in the United States. And today, there's still 1,300 children who have not been reunited with their parents, parents who never wanted to give their kids up. On February 23rd, the Trump administration announced they would directly target unaccompanied minors for deportation. These are our clients in our office at South Dakota Voices for Peace. These are children who have come to the United States for refuge without a parent, without a guardian. Then, on March 21st, the administration terminated all federal grants that funded legal services to these same minors, as 100% of them are in immigration court. Now children must show up to immigration court without lawyers and defend themselves from deportation. Our youngest client is 5. Morality and justice have to be a part of immigration reform. Deportations do not curtail illegal entry. Amnesty programs do not curtail illegal entries. The things that will curtail illegal entries: revamp the system to have parameters for increased lawful entry and ensure that there is liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and very much appreciate your words. Ben, we're looking forward to hearing from Senator Thun's office.
Thanks, Joel, and thanks to the McGovern Center for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm kind of the outsider in this group. This is immigration policy is what these three do for basically a living. I, as Joel said, handle a lot of different issues for the senator, running a Sioux Falls office. And just for awareness purposes, since we didn't go through the long bio, our office has 3 offices here in the state, Rapid City, Aberdeen, and then in Sioux Falls. I run the Sioux Falls office. The main role of our office with limited staff in Sioux Falls, well, we do 2 different things. We do casework, which I'll get to in a second because it actually touches on a few things that were said here, and then outreach, which is kind of what I'm doing today. Our office tries to go to as many events that are of importance across the state in terms of that people are doing. It covers a broad range of issues. To be honest, I'm used to talking more farm bill than I am immigration policy. And so, I mean, we tried to go to as many events, and some of those are just, I could be sitting in the back row just taking notes. I mean, that's part of what I do. Sometimes I'll get recognized for being in the audience, and I'll wave my hand or do a little prom queen king wave. And other times I read some remarks on behalf of the senator, and then other times more like a forum like this where I try to at least offer some back and forth to questions and provide some answers on behalf of the senator. So that's kind of the outreach side of what I do. Honestly, I don't do a lot of immigration stuff, and just kind of the nature of the beast in terms of when I go out and about. However, somebody in our Sioux Falls office, Sarah Hansen, that's all she does. And it touches on those first four that John mentioned in terms of the legal pathways to get here, whether you're dealing with family, refugees, when you're dealing with the lottery system. I mean, that's all she does. She's the busiest caseworker that we have in the Senator's 3 offices. We have it in all 3 offices. We have caseworkers that handle very specific family cases. That's what she does. We talked about privacy earlier. I can't obviously divulge some of those, and it's from, we're talking probably a lot right now about the southern border, maybe this evening, but this is globally, working with folks from across the world that are trying to come here to live and to work and to raise a family. And so that's all she does, and she'd probably be a much better expert to talk on the specific, cases in terms of how the immigration policy is actually implemented. She's not an immigration lawyer. I will tell you that in Sioux Falls, immigration lawyers send their clients to her when we're working on a certain aspect of their clients' cases, and that's reaching out to various embassies or offices throughout the world. They oftentimes reach out to her, and she is considered pretty much an expert when it comes to specific immigration policy as it's being implemented by the agencies. But one of the bigger reasons we're probably already here is the conversation. It's no secret. When President Trump took office, actually, when he ran for office, he was very specific in talking about a very strict border policy. It's not a surprise. He talked a lot about it in his first term, and then now he obviously won. But one thing I think it might be important to also point out is the American public was also concerned about immigration policy. I think there was a poll done probably, I think it was August or September of the last election cycle, where 87% of the nation's voters were concerned about the policies regarding the southern border. Now, obviously, that could go both directions. I mean, some were in favor of the previous administration's efforts, and others were opposed to it. But if you actually then turn to after the election, the New York Times, definitely not a conservative bastion of knowledge there. I mean, they run to the left on issues. They said immigration was one of the biggest differences in this election cycle, and the public went to the Trump administration on that specific issue. Now, that doesn't mean everybody agrees. Even if you think it's a very important issue, doesn't necessarily mean you agree with how the current administration or the past administration has dealt with the immigration issue. As these guys said, it's a complex one. Our office, I've been with Senator Thune since in the Senate 2005, but prior to that out in D.C. in his House time. It's one of the more complex issues. I should say that most issues are complex when it comes to D.C., but it is very much a complex issue, and I will say it's a very emotional one. People have, over time, probably dug in their heels even more so than they had previously. I think earlier on you were talking about ways to, perspective and come together with ideas and try to find mutual agreement on things. It's hard. And we get that on a lot of different issues when it comes to policies in D.C., but immigration, it's definitely a hard one to do. In my time working for the Senator, they've made different attempts to try to do big, large-scale immigration policy where it usually falls apart under a few different categories. It falls apart, first and foremost, I would say, from the right on border security. Is there enough border security protections that are put into the legislation? And I can tell you right now, the wall is one of them. If there's no wall in legislation, it's probably dead. On the other side of other side of it, though, it's citizenship. And if there's not citizenship included with it, it's probably dead. So both sides are very, they're extremely far apart. That's kind of the nature of it all. They have made attempts to try to find that middle ground. Even during President Trump's first term, twice he actually went to Congress saying, the first time I think it was probably in 2018, regarding the Dreamers that was mentioned earlier. Actually, that was probably the most far out in terms of policy that's been proposed, especially from the Republican administration, would have been on the Dreamers to get X amount of dollars for the wall. I can't remember what it was, offering Dreamers an extension of status, but then also the potential for citizenship after 10 to 12 years. That went nowhere. About a year later, when they were dealing with the partial government shutdown, there was an offer for $5-point-something billion for the wall. It would have been a 3 to 4 year extension on protection for Dreamers. That unfortunately went nowhere as well. So I think both sides have offered different opinions on how best to do this, but doing comprehensive border security is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult, just because when you're dealing with 535 members of Congress, you're going to get a lot of different viewpoints. Even within this room, I can tell you right now, there's a difference in viewpoints when it comes to this issue. That's okay, that's what's supposed to happen, but trying to come up with a piece of legislation that gets everybody to agree on, it's probably never going to happen, but can you get enough to agree on where you can get 60 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House and a president that will sign it? That's the challenge. And we'll see if that happens. My boss is one generation removed from being an immigrant from right here in Mitchell. His grandparent came here from Norway, and they set up shop here in Mitchell. I've heard the story countless number of times. Myself, my dad's a Canadian citizen, my mom's a U.S. citizen. I understand it from that perspective. Quite different, though, and I'm not going to make light of that. It's quite different than some of the issues that others are facing when it comes to the immigration process. But, it's something that, eventually these folks here can talk about a lot better than I can in terms of the specifics. But truly from a policy standpoint, or from a politician, as Mary likes to say, my boss would love to see it, and he's said it plenty of times. A big wall with a big gate. Want secure borders, but a lot of legal pathways for people to come here, to work here legally. And that's kind of my boss's perspective. And I look forward to your guys' questions, comments, concerns, accusations, doesn't matter. I'm more than happy to listen to it all. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this. My job, to be honest, is more of a listener and take everything that you guys say and your thoughts, write them down, and get them to the senator and to our D.C. staff that handle these issues specifically. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ben. So the next step is to let the panelists will ask questions of each other, and so they each can ask one question of one of their panelists. And so, John, we're going to continue the same order.
All right, sounds good. Ben, my question is for you. Is there any discussion within your office or within greater DC of reviving 245I, INA Section 245I? To me, that's probably one of my favorite sections of the INA, and I think it was an amazing compromise between right and left. And is there any discussion of reviving it?
Can you tell me 245I?
Sure. 245I was a section of law that allowed, it allowed for adjustment of status for an otherwise eligible alien whose only bar to receiving a green card was an EWI, an entry without inspection. So when the alien had initially entered illegally, but they otherwise had a path to a green card, whether employment-based, family-based, or otherwise, they essentially, in lieu of the normal inspection that was required, inspected and admitted or paroled, they could instead pay a fine. I believe 245I still to this day sits at $1,000 is what the fine was. And then for lack of a better term, the government forgave the EWI and allowed adjustment of status.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that one. You should have given that one. I could have gotten an answer probably for you on that one with a heads up. But I do, I mean, that's kind of what the example of what I'm talking about today is looking at, and I was actually going to ask you, what would you like changed? So now I kind of got to come up with another different thing.
One of the, if you don't mind, one of the compromises, and I think you said a big wall with a big gate. One of the things that I've heard, and as a compromise reach across the aisle, is bring back 245I, crank up the fee, use the fee to pay for the wall. I'm not saying that I agree with the compromise, but that's one of the things, and I'd say that to me that would be a wonderful, I'm not saying it's going to be a solve-all, but I think it would be a wonderful benefit to a large group of people who would be otherwise eligible for status but for an unlawful entry.
Yeah, I got that one noted down. To try to get you an answer for that, I could try to do that.
So, Mary, do you have a question?
I don't really have a question. The only thing that I can think of, and you can all choose who to answer it, is what I'm going to steal from what he just said is, what should I take back? Again, if there's one thing, I don't want to say what's the one thing that you want me to take back because I don't want to limit that, but if there is something overarching that we can do at the ground level, I'd like to hear about it.
Denise, I'm sure you may want to answer that question.
Well, I don't want to be the bad guy up here. You know, it is more of a policy. I firmly believe that we've lost our center when it comes to immigration policies and laws in terms of morality and dignity and humanity, with some of the examples I cited of children being separated at the border. You know, since the administration took office, there's been 218 immigration policy actions as of March 31st, which will essentially make millions of people who are lawfully present right now become undocumented because they will lose status such as temporary protected status and a whole bunch of other things. And refugee resettlement is done. That was day one. There's no more refugees coming to the United States. So I guess for both of you, do you have conversations about the dignity of the people that we're talking about and how these policies are implemented?
I'll answer her.
I got it. No, I appreciate your point. Having said that, again, law enforcement is generally speaking put in the bad guy position. I know the officers and the agents with whom I work do their jobs efficiently, they do it safely, they do it compassionately. I respectfully disagree with your characterization, for example, of the term alien. We use the term alien the similar way that a district attorney might use the term defendant to respondent. So I don't put the same meaning behind it or emotion behind it that perhaps somebody else does. I think, again, though, that with respect to dignity and listening and understanding who we're serving, that is literally the reason why I have a job. That is literally the reason why I'm here right now. So that we make sure, and that you make sure, that we understand that we are here serving the American public, whether you want us to provide that service or not. This is our job. This is what we're sworn to do.
Thanks. And I talked earlier about the staff. I mean, that's all she does in our office, and that's what we care about in terms of helping those individual folks. In terms of policies, yes, it's always discussed what is the best immigration policy for our country, and that's something that's heavily debated and often passionately. I'd also like to point out that this family separation actually happened during previous administrations as well, but I understand your desire to single out one administration. That's just the nature of the beast. I'm used to that when we go to these type of events, but at the same time, still not getting to the actual issue, the desire to actually try to come up with comprehensive immigration policy. As Mary said, we're a nation of laws. That's what they're enforcing. But we're also a nation of immigrants, and it would be great if we could come up with some sort of policy that tackles this. But first and foremost, to get anything done, the border security has to be number one. It is a proven fact that terrorists have come across the border. People on the terrorist watch list have come across the border and been apprehended. That's fact. It's not a made-up thing that the current administration uses. That's what we're being told by folks as they're coming across the border. What we need to do is secure the border and come up with a very good, comprehensive immigration policy, and it's not going to be easy to do. I don't know if it can be done. I'm hopeful. I've been at this for a long time, and 20 years plus probably now, and I'm still an optimist most of the time, and I do think there is avenues that we can make concessions on either side. What that looks like is yet to be seen because everybody's really dug in on both sides, on both parties. And it's one of those that we'll continue to work to try to find an answer to some of that. But we'll see what the voters also decide because they're the ones that decide whether or not who my boss holds office or, in this case, who holds also the White House.
Questions from the floor? John.
Hello, I'm John. I'm a county commissioner, so we get to see some of you once in a while. Just wanted to share that I think it's great, the conversation. I didn't know where it was going to go. Thank you for being good about that. It just occurs to me in all my years, I've always wanted to see a balanced budget. On our state level, we do that. The feds don't. And so for Ben, I know you hear this all the time, but what I'm wondering about is if we had a balanced budget right now, just envision that, would the temperature of the room go down? The chaos that people feel is just part of life. And all these pieces that you talk about, they're a part of that little friction. So I just wanted to lay that out, that I think we should be getting to that point. How many years is it going to be until we do it? And I worry about some of these college students. I was a young college student without money, but I didn't owe it all. Thank you.
I guess that's probably...
Before you head out.
Hey, I'm more than happy to let somebody else talk.
I'm going to let Ben answer that policy-wise and take a position on it, but I do want to clarify something, and maybe Mary can clarify this as well, but from my understanding, USCIS is actually in the black. They are a fee-funded agency, meaning the fees that applicants pay for their filings fund the agency. So I don't know how in the red immigration is causing the federal government to be. As a grader, it may be, but I just wanted to comment on that. I want everyone to understand that it's my understanding at least USCIS is fully funded by fees that applicants pay for their petitions and applications.
I have no idea. Thank you very much. No, I have no idea with respect to the budget. That is not what they hired me for. Believe me, that is not my area. What I will say is, apart from policy, this is a human issue. This is a nation of immigrants. We understand that. And the reality is there are people who are coming here to seek the American dream. And there's going to be a judge somewhere that says no. And again, that's where the police come in. So I think the temperature can come down lots of ways, but when it comes to saying no, that's not easy.
Yeah, in terms of the budget, it's been an issue for decades upon decades. It's not a quick fix. They over the weekend did a budget resolution, and the Senate side has now gone to the House. We'll see what they do with it this week, which will then start the reconciliation process, which then there'll be some things when it comes to immigration budgeting that will be a part of that discussion. I don't know for sure on the fees side of it, but USCIS, that's the one side of the immigration pot. You also have the other side, whether that's enforcement or investigations, and that's not funded by those fees. And I know for sure the administration has come and asked for certain dollars when it comes to the enforcement side of things. The numbers escape me off the top of my head, but I know that'll be dealt with when it comes to the reconciliation process.
Yes.
Hi.
Say your name.
Victoria Gustopoulos, born and raised here. My father's an attorney. I've worked with law enforcement and other things over my lifetime. My questions is specifically for Mary. So, what I've been noticing, at least throughout this discussion, is you've kind of been giving us the runaround. We haven't gotten an actual answer. All I've really heard right now is that everybody's mean to ICE. My question is, you talk about wanting to create a community safety, whereas how is that, in your perspective, a positive point when 75% of the men who got deported to El Salvador have no criminal record, no infractions on anything? They were just people living and going. And to add along with that, I'm going to bring up the discussion of the Nuremberg trials, because you also didn't really answer, at least in my perspective, Tanisa's question about how the agents feel. Where do we draw the line? Because do they even have an option at this point in time to step back and not use the words, "I was just following orders," because that does not hold up in a court of law. And from that perspective, as far as the agents go, the ones who don't want to put kids in cages and send innocent people away and break apart families, do they even have an option at this point, or are they just still forced? And I would really appreciate an actual direct answer, please.
Sure, and I'm sorry that you feel like I haven't been giving direct answers. I don't believe that I came out here and said, don't be mean to ICE. That's certainly not the message I'm trying to send. I find it to be a completely invalid comparison between the enforcement of laws that have been on the books for decades and Nuremberg and Nazi. I find that completely distasteful and completely wrong, in my opinion. These are laws that have been around. Our enforcement cycles up and down. We have heard the deporter-in-chief, right? I don't agree with those terms either. When it comes to law enforcement, our officers are going to follow the law. Whether it's a law you want them to follow, they're still going to follow it, right? Just like any police officer. They might not want, they might feel bad for somebody that they arrest, but they're still going to have to do it. If an officer of the law enforcement officer, starts deciding, you look all right, so I'm going to let you go, but you I'm coming after. That's anarchy. We cannot do that. So with respect to officer discretion, I mean, I think any law enforcement, there is a certain amount of discretion that is used. We don't hear about that on TV because that's not something that gets promoted. And again, we have privacy laws. But this idea that officers are being forced to follow the law, I think is kind of a misjudgment. So I don't know if that's straight enough for you, but that's the answer. So it's not the one you want, but I think that, again, that our officers are behaving within the law and they're doing what they're hired to do.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I'm a humanitarian immigration lawyer, so most of you will probably call me a bleeding heart. We work with kids and victims of crimes. We work with law enforcement, all of the things. I think one point of clarification is these are not laws. These are enforcement priorities. Each administration clearly outlines their enforcement policies, right? And so usually they're drug traffickers, sex traffickers, felonious, murder, all of the very high-level crimes is what has previously been the enforcement priority of administration. Right now, it feels like, regardless of what is on paper or what is being said in the media, it feels like there's no priority. And when policies come out that specifically are targeting children for deportation, that is, for me, a morality issue, especially because it's a policy. It is not statutory. So, how do we reconcile enforcement based on policy versus enforcement based on statute?
Can I address that? So what I would say is that the enforcement priorities are the enforcement of the law. So every administrator decides, perhaps the sheriff might say, I want to get every speeding motorist from point A to point B. That's their enforcement priority. That doesn't mean it's illegal. The laws are what the laws are, and the administration decides how our resources are going to be used to enforce them. So I understand what you're saying, but this is not some renegade, agency. There is an administrator who decides this is the focus of our enforcement. They decide that for all of federal law enforcement. This president has determined that there will be a whole government approach to immigration enforcement. That's where we're at today. The way we address that is, again, administration after administration. If you don't like this administration, then you have to work to get a different administration.
May I ask a question of you, Mary? One of the things that's concerned me is that, and I've seen some of the videos, like of the woman from Turkey at Tufts University that got deported, and I think she's still in deportation process now, or I don't know if she's being held somewhere. But, it was all unmarked cars, people with baklavas over their face. It really, really troubled me that there was no signage on the car, on the vehicles, that it was ICE, and so that really troubled me, and I don't know if you could provide some clarity there or some explanation as to why that, it seems so illegitimate to me, but maybe that's just my emotion. What are your thoughts on that?
We don't wear uniforms. We don't have uniforms. And if you will look at the video of any person who videotapes an arrest, the officer will pull out his badge or her badge as they're walking up and explaining what they're there for. We don't wear uniforms. We're not marked or uniformed. That's the answer.
I wonder why. Why not wear a uniform?
I don't make that decision.
Right.
We don't have uniforms. That's not what we do.
That really causes a lot of alarm and anxiety. I mean, even for myself, when I watched that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's terrible. There's, you're used to a policeman there in uniform, and it seems wrong to me.
You guys got me up here defending ICE now, which is wild, but let me, I will say, just as an example, and I know this is USCIS and likely not ICE, but, marriage-based, part of most marriage-based applications is an inquiry into the validity of the underlying marriage, right? That the marriage must not have been entered into solely to confer an immigration benefit. Plainclothes officers have tailed my clients all the time. That's just part of law enforcement, and I'm not in law enforcement. But if I had to make an ontological guess, it's probably so that the person whom you're observing remains unwitting, so that you can execute whatever it is you need to do. And I'm not agreeing with it morally. I don't think it looks good in the United States. Whatever happened with the vans, I'm somewhat familiar from the news. But I will say, my clients were tailed by plainclothes officers all the time in marriage fraud investigations, whatever it may be. It's a very normal part of administration enforcing their laws.
Can I add to that really quick? Let's see, where should I start? Community. We haven't talked about impacted communities at all, like the actual people who live, our neighbors, our children's friends at school, the people who are providing us food, all of the essential workers. So at South Dakota Voices for Peace, we also do Know Your Rights trainings. And then we also have our clients who are calling in terrified of leaving their home. They're not, and I know this firsthand, they're not sending their children to school. They're not going to work. They're trying to figure out how to get groceries and using Instacart or Hy-Vee online instead of actually physically going. I can't imagine what that fear feels like. And when we see these instances of the Turkish student and the instances of lawful permanent residents being detained without charges, the fear is exacerbated. And as a small nonprofit, we know we will never get in front of the fear. But if ICE believes there is a lot of fear and misunderstanding and misinformation, which I'm not sure if you do or not, but if you do, is ICE doing anything to provide accurate information to communities on what their role is and what they are to enforce? Because another impact of all of this, and remember, we represent victims of crimes, is the chilling effect and the victimization that will rise because they believe any law enforcement officer, now plainclothes law enforcement officers, are going to come and deport them.
Well, no one's asking me a question, but which is, I mean, it's fine. But the one thing I guess I'm not aware, and I know that ICE has. My assumption is there has been ICE enforcement here in the state of South Dakota. Pretty confident of that. We don't hear about these unless somebody contacts our office. With the children that you mentioned, nobody has contacted our office regarding that, so I understand the concerns on that. But I do know that there is 4 ICE officers in Sioux Falls, 1 supervisory agent, and then 3 others, and I think there's 1 in Rapid, and then 2 agents in Rapid. I mean, that's 7 people, and we're not. I mean, it's not like they're going down, breaking down into doors. My understanding in our conversations with Mary, not necessarily Mary specifically, but those within the agency, is what they're doing. Those agents are going through the court system. They're going through the jails. They're going through arrest records, finding those that have had some sort of criminal activity, that have been arrested, and that they are undocumented. That's what those very few officers within the state of South Dakota for ICE are doing, is looking for those. And I'm not those individuals. That's kind of how they're spending their time. I'm not saying across the country there are not other activities taking place, but that we care about this issue, and we do understand the idea of community and how it impacts our community. So we ask questions of the federal agencies. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? What is your thoughts on this? Can you explain to us? We're hearing things in the media and we're hearing things nationally, but what's going on here locally? So we ask those questions because we think it's important for our office to be at least educated on what is transpiring. And that's what we've done. And it's not just, okay, one and done type deal. We've done it now. It's kind of like once a month since the beginning of January. But this isn't also a new issue. This is something that, as you were throwing out numbers in terms of deporters in chief and such, obviously deportations happen under every administration apparently. So it obviously happens, and it's going to continue to happen as long as people are breaking the law and not following the law, which ICE and other agencies have to enforce and should enforce.
Mary, did you want to answer Teresa's question as well?
Well, my job is literally to speak with community members. So I have spoken with churches. I have spoken with different cultural groups within Minnesota. It's the first time I've been back to South Dakota in a while, but I was recently talking with some victim service providers. I mean, I pretty much come out and I talk to people. I'm not usually invited until people are really mad about something. And then I can come out and I can say, you know, this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing. The reality is that anybody who is here either entered illegally or has done something since they have been here to make them potentially removable is someone who could be removed. That's the way it is. What we do prioritize is public safety and national security, but that doesn't mean we're going to ignore anyone else. That's the reality of immigration enforcement at this point. But yes, the answer is yes, we do go out and talk to people. Can I say something? Yes.
I just want to say, one thing that Mary had mentioned is that, you know, the ICE is enforcing the laws as they're currently written. And, you know, I think you had used a speeding metaphor, and I'm just going to continue with that. I mean, if I-90 is 80 miles an hour, but everyone knows that the cops only pull you over if you go 85, well, is it really 80 or is it 85, right? Let me have my hypothetical. But then all of a sudden, one day, you know, cops start pulling people over for going 81. Well, rumors are going to start to spread, and now what is it's going to come down. I was 7 years as an alien side to immigration attorney. ICE, Department of Homeland Security, was my opponent. Every single human being that came in front of me as my client, I zealously represented them, and I fought tooth and nail to either help them get the benefit or stop ICE from deporting them. But the reality is, if we were to win a case, if we were to prevent removal by seeking a relief from removal, it meant that the law was in our client's favor, right? Because we were able to argue and convince an immigration judge, or sometimes an ICE attorney, for them to revoke the NTA. We were able to convince them to stop removal proceedings or win the case, which meant the law was in our favor, which gets me back to my original point, which is, on the humanitarian side of it, access to legal services, access to assistance, and avoidance of scams in this ridiculously complex system is ultimately important, because right now the administration is just enforcing the laws on the books. Now, is there anecdotal evidence of some wrongdoing? Maybe. Are we not comfortable with how they handle it? Maybe. But generally, they're enforcing the laws as written, and we can vote our opinion on that. But access to legal services is extremely important. Organizations like hers, one of the things, if you want to help the world, call up one of these organizations and ask them what they need. It's probably money, but maybe you send them a ream of paper or something, right? But ask them what they need, because that to me, until we as the American people are willing to vote in politicians who are going to robustly change our laws, ICE is just enforcing the laws as written. And so the best way you can fight is by helping. Tell your friends and family and any foreigners that you're friends with to don't trust their buddy to file their paperwork, right? Tell your friends to get an immigration attorney and donate to organizations like this. Yeah.
All right. Buttons on. Y'all hear me? All right. So I have a question for you. I think this is more factual questions. You said something that sparked a question in my head. You talked about discretion. I think we maybe have a better idea of what discretion looks like for an officer on the street, but what does that look like for an ICE officer? Can you give me an example? And then I had a couple others. We heard from Ben about the numbers. How many ICE agents are working in South Dakota, and where are they? And then I think I'm just going to maximize this. I have three. Do you normally send out press releases? Do you tell the public when there is an immigration action in the way that other law enforcement agencies do? So that's three. Sorry.
3, 2, 1. Yes, there are press releases. They're ice.gov. We don't send them out in advance. We send them out afterward. No, we don't, because this is immigration enforcement has been happening every day since 18, whatever it was you said. I'm bad on dates. Thank you. Sorry. So immigration enforcement's been happening every day. What we're going to send releases to the media about is something that is newsworthy. So perhaps somebody was, wanted by Interpol for murder in their home country. Yeah, we're probably going to put that on the website. Worksite enforcement. Worksite enforcement's a huge thing because it directly impacts business owners. It directly impacts workers who, are oftentimes being mistreated, that sort of thing. So worksite enforcement is something that, if it's a larger operation, might make the media. But like I said, if you go to ice.gov, the press releases are there. That's not really my area. How many officers and agents are there in South Dakota? I have no idea. I don't know. I don't count them. We have people come in, we have people go out. We also have officers and agents, though, who will, if there's something going on at another office, they might travel. So I'm not even going to guess because I'll guess wrong. So I'm taking a pass on that, sorry. And I forget what question number one was. Discretion. So discretion, for example, anything from, I can think of an example, hey, can I run back in the house and get my stuff, my passport, my backpack, whatever, because I know that I'm I'm under a mandatory detention, so I know I'm not coming home. Can I go in and grab my stuff? Yeah, go grab your stuff. Hey, can I call my spouse because my kid has to get picked up at school? Yeah, you can do that. At the officer level, they're going to do what they can do if they're able to make things easier for the person that they may be taking into custody. At the field level, the attorneys, the chief counsels, whatever, they might be able to do something, hey, your client has a benefit that's been accepted, but it hasn't been enacted yet. I'm not doing good with my legal terms, but can we withhold the case? Can we put my background was criminal, so I always get the terms wrong, but can we basically put a pause on the case until the client's benefit comes through? Those kinds of things. So there are certainly case-specific decisions that can be made and that are made every single day. I can't think of the term. That. Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. I said that like 1,000 times just this week.
Did somebody need to answer you? Oh, I think you just touched on what was my question, and that was thinking about some of the cases of labor trafficking and things like that. What does happen to those U.S. citizens who take advantage of people, who bring undocumented workers into the country, take advantage of them, things like that? Is something happening to the people that are responsible for doing that?
Yes. So it can be anything from a fine. It can be Department of Justice might file criminal charges. Oftentimes, the worksite enforcement will start with a criminal warrant and then go from there. But yes, there are going to be immigration consequences for some of the people. Having said that, there also might be benefits that they're entitled to, but it's all very complicated. But the short answer is yes, something is done with the employers. It might be a fine, it might be criminal convictions.
A couple questions back here. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Melissa McCauley. I have a question in regards for Mr. Reddy. Ben, as you talk about the egg bill and everything with that, I'm going to bring it back home a little bit as far as South Dakota and rural. One of the number one things that we see right now in the work that I'm doing is with immigration and agricultural work. There needs to be a line, there needs to be discussed about how we're going to handle that, and this probably does go to you as well, Mary, as far as how we're going to handle that, because this is going to slow down agriculture, and production of food, whether that be here, Minnesota, Iowa, whatever you want to go into. Also, I want to say, since you do represent the good senator, or John Thune, I should say, I would love it if you would bring it back that we would all love to have a town hall with him. So that I'd just like to add in on this last part. Thank you.
And the last part I'll pass that on regarding the town hall. You're not the first person that's reached out on that one. It's been fairly public. In terms of, we utilize an immigration process already on agriculture, and as we've discussed, my boss would like to enhance and expand legal pathways. One of those ways to do that would be in the realm of agriculture or ag manufacturing or processing. There is opportunities to, I think, expand what we allow under legal work pathways than we currently do, and that's a matter of, can that be done in a comprehensive immigration bill? Again, I think it should be in a comprehensive immigration bill, but if that isn't possible to get something like that done, is there another piece of legislation out there where it makes sense to actually try to find some other legal pathways? So I'll use the Farm Bill as an example. Can you do a year-round visa for dairy workers? I mean, because they don't qualify under certain ag. That's one that's been pitched here by the dairy industry and by the state of South Dakota for several years. My boss agrees with that, and that would be one of the examples of how we can expand our legal pathways. So I don't disagree with you. I think that is something that would be beneficial to our ag economy and to our state, and I think probably, I would say also to our country, when you could expand legal pathways for folks to come into this country and live here and work here, contribute to the society and then also to their families. That's a great example of what should be included in comprehensive immigration reform.
I have a question from you. Do you have something you want to say?
You had mentioned me. That's just not something our agency has any control over. I mean, we don't get to determine the visa pathway for ag workers, so I'm sorry. That's not me.
Question from Matt Richards.
Check. All right. Reverend Matt Richards from the UCC Church here in town. My question is about propaganda. Recently, our former governor held a press conference in front of a mass holding cell. And I think one of the reasons why some people connect what they saw there with Nazi Germany is because it looked so much like what we've seen throughout history in regards to Nazism, fascism, and it was just an unwise, seemed very foolish thing for her to do. I'm wondering, and I'll address all of you on this, wondering, are there policies in place, are there laws in place that prohibit showboating and exploitive measures such as that, in line with the Geneva Convention, that she, probably, went against there, and how long before other agents and other people under her start acting the same way?
So I'm going to start again with the Nazi analogy. It's been a while since I've been in school, but under the Nazi regime, there were laws specifically created to disenfranchise you or you or you. These laws have been in effect for decades. So I find, due respect, I find the analogy completely inappropriate.
And I'm just speaking about the images.
Nope, but
And how it was triggering.
and that's fine, but I'm still going to address the difference between Nazi and what we're at today. This is a law-abiding country. This is a law-abiding institution. I will not, again, at the field level, we're not. That's not something that I can comment on. That I can, what the secretary does is what the secretary does. She doesn't work for me. I work for her. So with respect to agents and officers, our agents, our officers are trained in law enforcement. They are not exploiting. They are not. That's not what they're about. And the reality is, they also aren't trying to get publicity. I'm here because I'm a forward, facing person for the agency. but our officers and our agents are out there doing the work. And you can bet that when any law enforcement officer crosses a line, there's an entire swath of people from the public, there's people internal, there's people external who are going to hold them accountable if they do something wrong.
Go ahead, I'll answer. Oh, sorry. No, you guys go ahead.
What I will say to, maybe as analogous to the point you're making is, I started practicing in 2015, which is the tail end of an Obama administration. I had worked for 3 years before that under an Obama administration, into a Trump administration, and then into a Biden administration was my years of practice. And with the same ICE attorneys as opposing counsel, you could watch their attitude toward cases and willingness wane and wax with the current administration. Under an Obama administration, maybe you can call up an ICE officer or an ICE attorney and ask for a continuance. Hey, will you agree to a continuance? And they might. And then under the Trump administration, no way. Don't even bother picking up the phone. That's just one example. And so
It's the same attorney.
That's what I'm saying. The same human being, right? The same human being, just a new administration. So I will say, in the soccer world, we say the players reflect the coach's attitude. So I do agree with you that when the head honcho is saying one thing, that we can expect the lower to reflect that, good or bad. My opinion on it will go back to, once again, these agencies are enforcing the laws on the books, and it's our job to fight them. If we want to zealously represent the human being in front of us, right, my client. And so, hey, maybe now the ICE attorneys won't agree to continuances. Well, now we just change our tactics, and now we're going to go for this, or now we're going to do that, which then once again, to me, goes out to the underlying issue of access to legal services and how important it is understanding that this is a complex body of federal law, and understanding that these human beings need to be represented, whether by a private attorney or by a nonprofit, and they need to understand, they need to be represented in this system, because they don't know what I just, no 5-year-old kid is going to be like, ooh, it's Trump administration, so I can't call ICE and ask for a continuance now, right? Which once again gets back to the importance of access to legal services.
I have something to say after you're done.
You're more than welcome. I got a couple different points. So go ahead.
I just wanted to address what you said about we're a law-abiding society, and I'm going to push back against that a little bit. I think the chaos we are all feeling is that the laws are not being followed. And what I mean by that is contracts are not being followed. We had a contract that ended on March 29th, 2025, which was a 5-year contract through the Office of Refugee Resettlement to provide legal services for unaccompanied minors. There's 100 other legal services providers in our network. That contract was terminated on March 21st, 1 week before the expiration of the contract, and there's no renewal, which was guaranteed for 2 more years. And I think all of the organizations and entities who are getting cut, federal employees who are getting cut through probation, all of the things that we're seeing really is scary for most people, because those laws are what we depend on for law and order, for order, right? We have an administration that did not follow a judge's order and deported people to El Salvador. I mean, we know this the most because it's in the media. So I just wanted to push back on that. I think that's why a lot of us are here. That's why a lot of us are advocating for the people, is because it feels like, and there's evidence of, current laws not being followed, and you can just look at the litany of litigation that's taking place against these 218 immigration actions, and that's just immigration.
Did you have another question? I was just going to add, because I don't disagree with John when he's talking about in terms of legal services. There are scams out there. Our office has unfortunately run into those where there's been, I don't know if they were lawyers or passed themselves off as lawyers, where individuals that are trying to go through the legal process that have been scanned by individuals in Sioux Falls. We know for sure in Sioux Falls, I'm assuming in other places of the state, and those are things that we definitely agree that we need to find ways or folks are not impacted that way. The one thing you did mention, I just wanted to point out, just because it's kind of fun once in a while, John, you talked about different administrations, whether or not you can go up or down depending on who is there in office, but the law stayed the same. That didn't change. And that's what we're talking about, right, is what is current law. And could there be changes? I know we're wrapping up, and that's kind of the discussion point, whether it's now or as we leave here, as we reach out to our office or Senator Rounds or Congressman Johnson's office. That's what we're there. We take your viewpoints. I'll be first to tell you, we're not always going to agree with you. I will say this to close on at least on my end aside, the election happened in November. It was fairly clear where President Trump stood on immigration policy. He was elected president. I think it was roughly around 63% of the state of South Dakota voted for President Trump, knowing full well he had his ideas on immigration policy, and that's where we're at right now. And as I had said earlier, during his first term, he actually had provided opportunities on immigration policy, especially with those that were here, Dreamers under temporary status, had made some olive branch outreach to folks that maybe don't agree with him on a lot of other stuff, and it went nowhere. And so we'll see if the president comes back with something down the road. I know in Congress they're always looking at potential policy aspects, but in terms of my boss's perspective, no matter where we go on policy, in terms of bipartisan policy, first and foremost for my boss is the security of the border, to ensure it's a safe border at the end of the day.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone that's come. I do want to close with this one thing. If we could do this quickly. I would like for you all, each of you, to just tell us maybe in a sentence, what are we, maybe a sentence, sorry, that's ridiculous. As quickly as you can. Where is there some common ground that we could really work with? John, with your 245I.
I have that written down here.
Yeah, 245I. I mean, that's good. But yeah, where is there some common ground here that we can move on?
I think that, you were
yeah,
looking
yeah,
at me?
and let's just go down the.
Just looking at I think the common ground is, at least from my perspective, is having these conversations. I said this earlier, we can all find any number of people who should be allowed to stay in this country. Problem is who shouldn't, right? Having that conversation, if we can agree on what kinds of laws, it's the activity that you didn't get to do. How do we best create a policy that strengthens our nation and in a way that we want it to be, with the nation of immigration that we have built? I think that having the conversations is really the first common ground, because not everybody in this room thinks the same thing or agrees on the same thing. Hopefully, you have no idea what I think personally, because that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is how my agency is responding, at least for my portion of it. So continuing to have these conversations will help us find some areas, multiple, of common ground, which is a total non-answer, but that's all I can think of.
One sentence. I think we could expand legal pathways. That's one sentence.
Kind of like 245I.
Well, I mean, I don't know policy like these two do internally on what's going on, but I know what I mentioned was we need increased pathways to legal presence. There is no way to do that on our side of the hemisphere right now. outside of these temporary visas and maybe some family, which is like 0.00001% of the people that we see in the Western Hemisphere that are coming to the U.S., and that's a whole other thing about refugee process, and we don't have a refugee process on this side of the world and how that's impacting in politics and everything. So I'm hopeful that you said increase legal pathways, and I'll be looking forward to seeing more of that.
Common ground. I think the common debate, the debate tonight seemed to hinge on morally whether or not we think Mary is the bad guy, right? Mary being a metaphor for ICE. But I think the common ground is everyone agrees that Tunisia is the good guy. And what I mean, no. That doesn't mean we're not necessarily ICE is the good guy or the bad guy, but we know that Tunisia is definitely the good guy. But what I mean by that is nonprofits, legal services that represent individuals before a massive federal government dealing with an extremely complex body of law. The good guys in that, I mean, ICE, if a 5-year-old kid is removable, ICE, it's their job to attempt to remove them. We can debate about whether that's a good guy or a bad guy. The good guy definitely, though, is the person who sits at the table in immigration court with the 5-year-old and the person who represents them. And so I think that's the common ground. Go donate to a nonprofit. Tell your friends to don't do immigration stuff on their own. Get an immigration attorney.
On that note, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. If you want to get updates on the McGovern Center, there's a sign up over here, and you can also get a Vote for McGovern bumper sticker and a newsletter from the McGovern Center. And a week from tonight, we're going to be hearing voices of people who have been through the immigration process recently, some real interesting stories. So and I've got a flyer for those right over here. Thank you for coming this evening, everyone.